Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life, and whoever comes to me shall have everlasting life. Friends, we have gathered here today to celebrate the life of Barbara Dean Millspa Wittren. We are here to remember the ways in which she touched our lives, the ways she influenced us, and the ways that we are going to miss her. So before we get too far into this service, it's very important to let you know that Mike's family right here has suffered yet another great loss. More than just Barbara, last night Mike's sister, Aunt Dee Dee, passed away. And so it just feels like grief upon grief upon grief. And that's on top of yet another sister who passed away 3 months ago. And so this family is dealing with a lot. And so we've talked about today that feelings are going to come out. If you feel like laughing, please laugh. If you feel like crying, please cry. If you do something, it's going to allow somebody else to feel like they can too. And so that is a good thing. But I also tell you this because we need to be gentle with their hearts and try to be as present as we can in this moment so that they can be as present as they can. So I do want to thank you for coming today. I want to welcome you here to this church, this service of worship. It's very much what it is. If you need to get up and stretch, if you realize that you're surrounded by too many people and it's too hot, just use the excuse that you need to stretch, right? And move around. We do have some extra pews, and it's okay to do that. It's especially easy to move while we're singing a song. So look ahead and think about that if you need to do that. It's no problem, okay? If you need to use the restroom as well, we have some right here, and they're labeled. But if you feel funny using the restroom so close to everybody, just go down the hall. You'll find some other ones, okay? And it's fine. When we finish with this part of the service, there's a reception in this other room. There are more cookies than you probably have seen in your lifetime, plus some Hawaiian treats. There is a table that you'll want to look at, has some pretty special things that Barbara kept around, some things that her family has brought in, and you'll want to see these things before you head out. So in this room today, there are people from so many circles of Barbara's life. So many circles. I've heard just even this morning, just as you have come in, I guess it's the afternoon, that you're from teaching and you're from this group and you're from this group. It's amazing. Barbara lived here in Gig Harbor for much of her adult life. And so anywhere you go in this town, there is going to be someone who knew her. And someone who maybe worked next to her, beside her. At the desk, we have Kay Patterson, who said to me the other day, I worked next to her for 20 years. Right? Someone who remembers when Barb called to find out if their kid was okay. Maybe they weren't at school every day, right? So many people have that experience when Barb was the attendance secretary. So many of us have the experience of having a life that is better because Barb has been in ours. Barb was one of our emergency contacts for our kids. My kids are over here today. And while the school never ended up having to call them, thank goodness, my two daughters knew that Barb was a safe person that they could call and would be available for whatever they needed. These past couple weeks, I seriously cannot count. I have 10 fingers, but I cannot count on my fingers the many, many people in our church who told me that Barb was the first person to welcome them into this church. She made sure that she would go straight over to them at the end of worship and let them know that she was glad that they were there. And she would usually share with them how she came to this church as well. All those people talking about Barb's knack for welcoming people into the fold reminded me, though, of a story that I had forgotten about. When we first moved here, my younger daughter joined her first soccer team. And this also meant, because she was pretty young, that I was on the sidelines of practice at Artendale Elementary School with a bunch of people that I also had never met, okay? Well, I got a call on my cell phone, and it was Barb saying, well, where are you right now? And I'm thinking, well, I told her, right? And she said, well, Mike and I are going to be there in about 8 minutes. And they were, and they had a bag of Fisher Fair scones. Yes, and they handed over the bag, and they told me to go ahead and share it with the moms there and make sure that I left some for Peter and the kids. Yeah. That same year, Barb gave me a Tides soup cone thing. I don't know if any of you know what that is. Those of you who are involved in Gig Harbor High School probably do. It comes from the awesome tradition at the holiday fairs that are held at our two high schools. You know, Barb wanted new people to know what was important about Gig Harbor. She wanted us to know those things. So when she brought that, she said, next year, you need to make sure you go to this fair. This is where you can find that soup. You know, it's people like Barb that grab hold of our hearts. And we know that our lives are better because she was in it. Let us pray. Oh God, you promise to comfort those who mourn. And even as we mourn, help us to celebrate the life of Barb, a wife, mother, cousin, and aunt, grandmother, co-worker, advocate, and friend. Help us remember that her spirit lives on in our hearts and in our minds. Remind us that your love never ends, for nothing can separate us from the love of God. In this time of sadness, help us to cling to one another as family and friends, so that we may go on living lives worthy of the journey of life. Help us to pray so that we may find comfort. Amen. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and stand and sing together. This is a beloved hymn. It's a quiet one, but it's one that Barb would have sung countless times in her journey of faith.
It was my honor to be asked to read Psalm 23 today. But before I do that, they also asked me if I'd share some some of my experiences with Barb, that I knew her in so many different ways. I met Barb, I think about 14 years ago, and Mike too. They came visiting, checking out our church, seeing if this might fit better for them as where they were attending before. They loved it, but there were some audio issues that made it really hard for them to hear correctly. So after deciding that this would become their new church home, they wanted to get more involved. And they joined a small group that I was leading at the time. And as many of you know, Barb was involved in many type of groups. In fact, how many of you were involved in some kind of group with Barb over the years? Look at that. It's about 2/3 of us here at the moment. Barb also used her accounting background here at the church to serve on our finance committee and serve as co-treasurer as well as on our church council. And thus, for me, began a relationship that took many different dimensions. The small group we were in at the time, and we're in another one now until she passed away just a few days ago, provided Barb a safe place to share her hopes, her wrestling with decisions, her anxieties about family, health issues, and her many questions about God. And one of them was because of her feminist passions that really got upset, I think is the term we might say, about all the pronouns and the terms we use for God that were always seemingly so male. Now, since I was a retired United Methodist pastor, our relationship included some spiritual counsel as well. And I'd say we became good friends. And I became the recipient of Barb's caring and her compassionate style. Over 10 years ago, my first wife, Jan, died unexpectedly. They came to the hospital shortly after emergency surgery, and then when she passed away, they wanted to be there for me in every situation they could. And over subsequent months, Barb continued to inquire about my well-being, wanting to make sure that she was supporting me emotionally and spiritually. After they sold their home, they bought a motorhome, became temporary nomads, and then returned to Gig Harbor. And so our relationship took on yet another dimension. Barb asked me to help them navigate some financial decisions, as I had subsequently become a certified financial planner. Eventually, Barb's health worsened, and even as Barb faced her health problems, she maintained that compassionate nature and was concerned about others, including me. Within the last month or so, I've had 2 cataract surgeries, so I'm kind of looking at the script now, and it's somewhat blurred. And Barb kept inquiring if I was okay. And even from the hospital bed, she wanted to know, are you okay, John? And we can trust that Barb is okay. She's in God's presence, and she can continue to discuss gender issues with God as long as she wants. So, in respect of Barb's questions regarding God and God's gender, if God has one, which we all wonder, I'm avoiding male pronouns in reading this psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. You make me lie down in green pastures. You lead me beside still waters. You restore my soul. You guide me in the paths of righteousness for your name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Thank you, John. When Methodist kids go through confirmation, we make a list of Bible verses that are particularly important amongst Methodists, and ones that we all should know and recognize when we hear them. And Psalm 23 is definitely one of them. Micah 6:8 is another. What does the Lord require of you but to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God? There are many others, of course, but this verse, it's a link between the Old and the New Testaments, and it's one of the verses that absolutely drove Barb in her life. You know, it wasn't that many years ago that I officiated at the service of Barb's mom, Dorothy. And reading back over my notes from that service, I noticed something that shouldn't have surprised me at all, but it did, because it's unique and in there. But the things that Barb cared deeply about are all the same things that her mother cared about. Almost the same. I probably could have taken that sermon and put it here. Dorothy passed along her passions for justice to Barb and taught her to be a feminist from a very young age. Many of you have heard the stories of Barb at marches, at rallies, of a bullet whizzing by, and the resulting battle of fear that continued to plague her each time she made yet another decision to stand up or to stand out for human rights. You know, it comes at a cost to do these things, and Barb knew that. But it was part of the faith that she grew up with. It was part of the understanding of her family that made for being a good citizen. And it's been a part of her faith in the last 20 years of her life. It also became deeply connected to what it meant for her to become a Christian and to follow God's call on her whole life and not just part of it. You know, even 9 days before she died, Barb attended a workshop to learn additional ways to support gay and trans kids. 9 days before that. And 14 days before that, she was at a racial justice prayer meeting. And the leader, Amy Gates, wrote to the group that Barb had never missed a meeting since the group began. She was committed to the cause and committed to the groups. Many Tuesday nights this past year, she and Mike could be found at school board meetings, supporting voices, asking for equity and compassion for minority kids in our district. Barb absolutely refused to turn a blind eye to the injustices in this world, and she did all that she could to help turn the tide. But it wasn't just flashy causes she worked for. Barb was one of our co-treasurers, as John said, for over 10 years. It's a position that most people will never fill. It is only those people who are willing to spend countless weekly hours poring over numbers with a detailed precision to make sure things are done right and then carried out well. It is a labor of love that very few people ever even get to witness, as it's usually done in this tiny little closet. It's kind of a funny thing. And yet, if it is not done well, it can truly rock the stability of an entire church's ministry. Barb's work, wherever the work was, it mattered to her. And when she did that job for us, it made a difference for an entire organization. Barb was stubborn to a fault, even if it did serve her well at times. But she was caring, and she would often notice a need and want to take care of it. I got many emails and Facebook messages from her at different times of the night, the morning, whatever. We should do this, we should do that. And, sometimes we did. She liked to take charge when she could. And she always, can I say that more? Always wanted to be involved. She simply couldn't sit on the sidelines. She wanted to do, she wanted to be, and she also wanted to always be in the know. And she certainly was in the know, not just here at church, but Barb worked at the kids' schools. I'm so sorry. My family deals with this too, so we understand. But Heather remembers that her teachers would often tell her mother her grades before she even found out about them. Yeah. And Alan and Barb had a mom who was absolutely involved, more than they wanted at times, but Heather also said that she never questioned whether she was loved, ever. In fact, she said her mom was passionate about her family and would not only give anything for them, she was clear that being a grandmother was the best thing that ever happened in her life. Heather shared how moving away actually created a new kind of a relationship for them. It meant that they talked on the phone. It gave them space where they could actually chat as friends. And it was a friendship. They talked often. They talked about everything from kids to politics to your father. And in fact, these everyday phone calls and texts are what Heather says that she is going to miss the most. She said already just a few weeks ago, it went from constant, almost too much, to nothing. Her phone is quiet. For Mike, when I asked him what he would miss the most, he said he was going to miss a good friend in every way. Barb and he shared mutual support on everything. And while most of us will see Barb as the talker and Mike more quiet, he assures us that they talked things out. They did. I know, right? But in case you didn't know, when you drop out of college to get married, and then you continue to be friends and find that support in each other for 56 years, it was good. It was good. Mike, you're the only one who knows exactly what it's like to be married to Barb. No one else has that experience. And while you have the support of so many, we know that you still carry this alone. You have been a compassionate, loving spouse. You've been helping and you've been caring beyond your capacity for a really long time. I pray for your rest and healing that you can choose any way you need to, for your support and love that is going to come from the people surrounding you, along with the comfort and the peace that only comes from God. May it be yours. Many folks have been dealing with the shock that Barb died so quick and fast. But these last years, they haven't been easy for Barb. Not at all. And it was tough on her friends. It's been tough on her family. It's been tough on all of us to see Barb having a struggle to do the things she cared about. It really has. Barb had so many circles of support, and all of you in some way have cared for her. You have loved her, and you were likely part of the reason that she was really finally able to let go in that last day with peace. You made a difference. Before all of that, though, we watched Barb's health decline, and pain was constant, and breathing was often very difficult. She simply could not do many of the things that had always given her meaning and purpose. She really did struggle to let go. I'm not just talking about life. She struggled to let go of the things she was holding on to. It was hard. She tried to hang on as long as she could, for better or for worse, really. And no matter how frustrating it may have been to watch, she was holding on because she cared. She was holding on because she cared. In her best moments, she really did believe that she was going to get healthy and just be able to jump right back in. And in the worst moments, she wondered if she would even make it to the next election. And here we are. Barb wanted to see change happen in this world. And she knew in her heart of hearts that you cannot wait for someone else to do the change. You have to be the change you want to see in the world. That may be what Gandhi said, but it's what Barb chose to live in her life. So if you want to pay tribute to Barb, then you're going to have to live out your values. You're going to have to vote. You're going to have to show up to learn something that challenges you. You're going to have to sign up to use your unique gifts that will serve some organization that you care about. And you will stand up and you will stand beside those who are hurting, those who need their own voice amplified a little louder so that others will listen. And my friends, if you do that, and if you have done any of that alongside Barb, then you have loved her well in her time of need. And you will love her well even as she cheers us all on from eternity. Amen.
Well, you didn't need to play that before. I'm like tearing up. Okay. Thank you all for coming today to honor my grandmother. She would have loved seeing how many people ended up coming out just because of her. This was the same woman that had a list of appropriate names for her grandchildren to call her. My name is Lydia. I am Barbara's favorite grandchild. I mean, first grandchild. Sorry, first. Sorry, there's only. I'm the one that told her no to everything on that list and ultimately gave her the name Amy, which all of the grandkids continue to call her. One good thing that has come out of this was seeing my family grow closer together. My grandparents from my father's side flew up to help. My father helped sort out so many of my grandparents' financials, and my mom and grandfather have spent some of the most important moments together in the past few weeks. You really know you got a good family when they drop everything to help. A lot of you knew my grandmother through church, past jobs, or just because of the area. Y'all know how Gig Harbor is. And all of you have your own ideas and memories that you hold close to your heart surrounding my grandmother. I ask that you continue to keep those close, because being in a different relationship to her than all of you allowed for my family and I to see another side of her than you. And when composing my speech and figuring out what I was going to say to honor her, I was struggling to write something for everyone to feel seen and recognized. I know that my mother and my uncle had a very different experience than my brother and I, or even all of you. I did not want to sugarcoat any of the hard times that we've all gone through, nor taint any of your beautiful memories with my grandmother. But after careful consideration, I knew I needed to write something for myself, from my own experience, and something that allows for me to ultimately grieve. I was very fortunate to make it to the hospital before Amy passed, and that is something I have thought about since. I, of course, will spare you all the details, as many of you saw the state she was in, but to be honest, it scared me. At the time, I felt like I needed to be strong for my mother and my grandfather, but seeing my grandmother like that was one of the hardest things I've gone through yet. I've been extremely fortunate to make it to 20 years old and have had all 4 of my grandparents still with me. So not only was this the first death I've ever had to deal with, it was someone whom I struggled to have the relationship that I wanted to have with her. My grandma, as I'm sure as all of you know, was so very stubborn. Molly had pointed that out as well. This was as much a flaw for her as it was a strength. There are countless times I can recall pushing her buttons over silly little things and her eye. Years ago, I would have been so excited to tell her that Joe Biden stepped down and endorsed Kamala Harris. It was really weird yesterday hearing the news. It made me cry, to be honest. Not because of the politics, but because I know the conversations Amy and I would have had and the Facebook posts my grandmother would have shared with all of you would have been some sort of relief. Something to really take the edge off of politics. She was always someone to complain to about that. And for me, I feel guilty more than anything right now, that I didn't spend the last few years that I had with her, especially being so much closer than before, talking about the things that we once did. Now, I'm refusing to use this as a therapy session, nor am I going to tell you all to forcefully spend time with your family just so you don't regret missed time one day. Because at the end of the day, I am happy with the boundaries I set, and I understand that this is just a part of my own grieving process. The weirdest part for me was the memory I thought of when I said goodbye. When I was younger, my family had moved in with Amy and Papa for a while. Now, I'm sure that this time during my life was a lot different than my parents, and I'm sure I remember this very differently. You can check with them later. I was so very young and potentially not even conscious of my own surroundings quite yet. But this memory would not leave my head when looking at my grandmother. As we were moving out of my grandparents' house, I found a square purple jewel in the big greenhouse's driveway. Something plastic and extremely cheap. When I was getting in the car to move down south, I remember giving Amy the jewel. I remember her crying as she said goodbye to me. And being so young, I thought nothing of it. I was just excited to be there. And just a few years ago, I saw that purple jewel in her dresser while visiting her. I think that this memory was the way that my body was telling me that in my own way, or that in her own way, she cared. Although it may not have always been in the way that I wanted or needed at the time, she did. I'm very sure that this was not the speech that all of you expected, and that's totally okay. Amy asked me to speak, and as you can probably tell, I don't have experience in public speaking. Heck, I serve coffee all day as my job. But I knew that in order for me to grieve, and hopefully for my immediate family to grieve, I would need to write something from the heart. Amy trusted me to do that, and so I did. And so I leave you all with this. What is grief if not love persevering? May Amy rest in peace.
Hello, my name's Elaine, and I was a friend of Barbara and a friend of Mike. I was asked to talk today for 3 minutes. I was also asked to talk about politics. So I chose what I would talk about. I was with Barb in the last 3.5 years when she was having the respiratory issues. I was with her when she had a lot of back pain and trouble with her hands getting them to work. I began to notice some in her texts that she had some memory issues. And I was with her as she lost some of the activities that she enjoyed doing. I truly believe today she's free. She also, Mike and Barb, were my emergency contacts, just like your daughter. I was a widow. My daughter was out of state, and my brother lived out of state. So they were my trusted people. Whenever a fire truck, an emergency vehicle came in my condo area, she called me. Every time. Are you okay? Yes, Barbara, I'm okay, and thank you. Whenever I needed something done in my condo, Mike will do it. She always said, Mike will do it. And Mike did it. I had a whole floor in my kitchen, dining room, and living room that flooded, and I had a closet that needed to be redone, and Mike did it. And it looked better than it did when it was built. I want to talk a few minutes about my church family here. When I went to see Barbara, I immediately called out to some of the church members for help. And before I could get back there the next day, people were already there. But a minister that came at 5 in the morning. We had friends that prayed through the prayer chain. And I appreciate that. And I know Barbara did too. There were 3 groups that we were part of. The prayer shawl group, the racial justice group, and a group I called the Joy Lunch Club. The prayer shawl group made prayer shawls for people that were in distress. We met on Saturdays, and she came on Saturdays. I often drove her there, and we had several chats. She got so she couldn't do it. Her hands just wouldn't work. And so she ended up giving all of her needles and her crochet hooks to the prayer shawl group. It was like Christmas. And we knew they were hers, her mother's, her grandmother's, so we appreciated it. I received a container, a cloth container that has little pockets in it that her grandmother made. I hold that dearly. We were in the Racial Justice Committee. I didn't attend as faithfully as she did. She and Mike were there every week, or every time they met. She believed in humans, all humans, and she listened intently to what they had to say. The Joy Lunch Club. One day, Nancy Elwood, I'm sure she's here, and I decided that we would get a group of people together about the same age that were very active in the church, and we would get together for lunch and not mention church. Not once. That was our goal. And we enjoyed it. And Barbara was there. And Barbara got so she couldn't come to that. She was a member of the church council, it's already been said, and she was a part of the financial committee, and she was a treasurer and a co-treasurer. I think that's what she hated giving up the most. She was gracious in giving up each one of these jobs, roles, but she felt that her expertise was in that, and that's what she enjoyed doing for the church. We would text or call each day. Barbara always had her phone available. I could text her at any time, and I would always get a response back. We agreed with most everything, except cilantro. I can't stand it, and she loved it. Also, we couldn't agree on who had the best husband. We fought about that a lot. I learned about her history in Kansas and Hawaii. How different could that be? She loved working for the school district. Her father was a prisoner of war that she didn't meet until she was 4 years old, and her grandfather stood in, and she dearly loved her grandfather and her mother, who was a great artist. She loved her family. I'm going to talk about them a little bit. I got to know you through those texts. You can roll your eyes, you can do anything during this. I don't care. She loved her daughter. Daughter is a teacher, taught in the South, and also taught in Auburn, substitute teacher. 2 different places to teach, for sure. She loved her son, Alan. I learned more things about you from high school and college. No. She laughed about it then. I don't think they laughed about it so much during the time. She loved her in-law children, her son-in-law and her daughter-in-law, and those grandchildren. We talked about grandchildren. I talked about Hazel and Henry. I always have to mention them. She has 2 grandsons. They're very handsome, love soccer. And I got to watch a lot of those videos. She had some question about their hair. And I would say, hair can be cut. She has 2 beautiful granddaughters. One got a scholarship in beach volleyball. Until I knew Barbara, I didn't know there was such a thing as beach volleyball. And then there's the granddaughter, I think she was 19, that took over a whole Starbucks, new Starbucks, moved halfway across the world from her parents, and could choose any university she wanted to go to. These are good, disciplined children. They're loving children. If my 2, Hazel and Henry, can be anything like them, I will know that I did a good job too. Okay, politics. We're both strong-minded women. We'll start there. We believed in the correct candidates. We knew the right platforms. We just couldn't understand why the rest of you didn't agree with us. I wanted to talk to Barbara so much in the last 4 weeks. I'm not going to tell you which way we believe, but I think you can tell. But I will say, there's one thing I think that might make her furious, and that is if you don't vote in November. Barbara's a friend I will remember. I will want to celebrate who she was and the influence that she had on many of us. One of the last things I said to Barbara in the hospital was, say hi to Steve. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Charlotte. I prepared this last night. I told Heather that it would be 4.5 minutes. I can't guarantee that, but I'm going to try. Okay. When I met Barb in my senior year in high school, I had no way of knowing that we would be friends for 50-plus years. It just kind of happened that way. So we hung out together in high school, probably went to Farrell's Ice Cream Parlor on Friday night, and Shakey's Pizza in Bellevue. I went to her house more than she came over to mine because I live with my brother. And somehow her parents didn't object to my being there, so I must have been okay. But one night there was a sleepover. I was over at Barb's house, and she brought up Cyrano de Bergerac. And I have no idea why she brought up Cyrano de Bergerac. You know, the memory doesn't serve me. So we're munching popcorn and trying not to make too much noise, but being really silly. And so I pop out with Siripop de Bergercorn. And we just couldn't stop laughing. We're rolling on the floor, making all kinds of noise. And her mom comes in and takes one look at us and wonders what's going on, and finally just throws up her hands and leaves. But to the very day, we're playing Scrabble, driving the car, going down the road, singing. Old Siripop de Bergercorn would just still make us laugh out loud no matter what was going on. It's one of those things that just keeps on giving. Barb loved the beach, as many of you probably know, and a couple of times the two of us, just the two of us, went to the beach. In 1980, I invited Barb to join me after my employer gifted me with a weekend at the beach, instead of a raise, but a weekend at the beach. I guess Mike must have agreed to take care of Alan and Heather because she was able to come along. So we went to Lincoln City, and we stayed in a beachfront hotel and hit the shops in Depot Bay and had an absolute blast. Of course, you know, the beach is the beach, and on the memory table you'll see in there, there's a picture of Barb enjoying some saltwater taffy, which I guess is a lifelong treat that she really enjoyed. And there's taffy in there for you to all enjoy. It's Oregon taffy, so please help yourselves. Anyway, I made that picture and used it as part of an assignment in a photojournalism class that I was taking, so I attached a caption to it, right? And the caption isn't exactly correct. She did not pull out 3 fillings and need to be rushed to the dentist. But it did make for more interesting copy. Then, for my 40th birthday, Barb found a really good deal on a room in Grays Harbor. Now, this is going to sound like bad Hemingway, but it really was a dark and stormy night when we arrived at our motel. We checked in and then decided to go to the ocean. The rain was going sideways. We were yelling at each other because we couldn't be heard over the wind, and some guy was hollering from a condo up in the dark somewhere. And so we decided maybe it wasn't such a great idea to trudge to the beach in the dark, and we went back to our room. But during the same trip, Barb wanted to go to a Hawaiian restaurant, and that was something that she really enjoyed, and it was several miles away, and it was still raining, so we drove, and we got there okay. But I don't remember much about that night, really, except that when we left and were coming back, there were several inches of water on the road, and Barb driving this big car, I think it might have been a Buick, powering through the water that was coming up to the sides of the bottom of the doors and worrying that she might flood the engine. We made it. We did make it. And we got back to our motel, and then the next morning when we looked outside, it was like we were slowly sinking into the water. And there was a tiny patch of road still leading out that we could escape on. So we canceled that night's reservation and got back to Gig Harbor. It was still raining. And Barb struggled for weeks, maybe months after that, to get the refund on that last night that we didn't get. Not sure if she ever got her money back, but do beware of Groupons. I could tell you how she was so mad at me for getting out of home ec our senior year. Well, she got stuck in there and hated it. Or I could go on about our trip to Europe with the Sammamish High School Choir and how she always got the best roommates, like Ann Wilson. Well, I ended up with a bunch of girls I hardly knew and didn't really like. Well, for spring break in 1968, she came home with me to Portland. That's when I introduced her to the guy she ended up marrying a few months later, Mike. We spent many nights eating popcorn and playing canasta in their dining room in Portland. I met Alan and Heather soon after they were born. And when she and Mike moved to Gig Harbor, I missed her and still visit her once in a while, like annually at least twice, I think. Barb stuck by me through some of the craziest years of my life, even though she had a totally new life with a great husband and great kids in a beautiful little town. I've shared just a tiny bit about our friendship. There were a lot of things that we did together. There's so many more cherished memories. She was my best friend. And as long as those of us who love her and remember her hold her in our hearts, she'll live on. Thanks for letting me share.
It's true that there's a lot more that we could say. So many of us have memories, so I hope that you will share those with each other. If you look in your bulletin or on the screen, we have the prayer of commendation. This is the most ritualistic thing we will do today. This is time where we give Barb back to God. So let's pray this together. Lord, we give thanks for the gift of joy in times of health and for the gift of your presence in times of grief. We praise you for Barbara's long and full life, and we thank you for the ways we were part of her life and the ways she was part of ours. And now we commit her spirit to your eternal care. Help us hold our memories close to our hearts. Amen. Friends, grieving is a very holy process, and the healing is done best when we share and hear the memories from others, soak those in, think about them, deal with them, realize, just like Lydia said, that our experience is not what someone else's is, right? It helps us to take the whole picture of a person. So this family, as you know, and her best friends, those people close to her, have dealt with a big loss. And so all of us together need to help one another grieve. Ask people about their memories. Call people if you can. Send texts. Don't pretend that it happened once and never happened again. Do that for one another. Don't be afraid to bring up Barb's name, especially in a certain group. You're going to miss that she's not there. It's much harder when you don't mention it. It's better when you do. If you mention it, someone else is surely thinking of her too. It's good and right to remember together. Okay. Barbara loved to sing. We didn't talk about that a lot today. It's okay. Choir was one of her favorite things as a young woman. She has great memories from that. She loved all music, and especially music in church. Didn't matter which service she went to, she loved it all. And so we're going to stand, and if you're able to sing, we're going to sing together Amazing Grace. Yeah.
Saved a wretch like me.
Death feels final, it never has the last word. In this knowledge, may the peace of God be with you. May the love of God surround you. May the hope of God be in you as you grieve and as you live. Amen.